Well, welcome everyone. My name's Matthew Cutler Welsh. I'm the Education Manager at Clima, and I'm really excited to be part of this presentation today. I'm hosting this event and we're hosting this event on behalf of the Roofing Association of New Zealand, which is a real privilege to be able to have 4 very experienced panelists here from the industry. Most of you in the audience are from the design industry, so architects, architectural designers and specifiers. And we've been doing quite a lot at Clima this year, talking about some of the technical aspects of roofs in particular. And it's been great to work with the Roofing Association. We were lucky enough to be involved with a virtual conference this year. And from that sparked some really great conversations and some good connections. So this is partly as a result of that. And the idea of today is for us to hear from some really experienced business owners and people in the roofing industry who are out there in the real world, seeing stuff and doing the hard yards, I think, out in the sun, in the rain, out in the elements, putting your visions as designers into reality. And so this is a chance to hear from them what they're seeing out there, what's working, and what we can do to make life easier for people who have quite a big responsibility and do a really good job of keeping the rest of our buildings dry and protected from the elements. So thank you for joining us. We are using GoToWebinar today. The session is being recorded, but that really only affects us on the screen that you see. If you do want to interact, please feel free to use the chat window. Eva there is in Wellington. You want to give us a wave, Eva?
Hey everyone.
She will be helping me facilitate with some of the questions. So please, if you do want to chat, make a comment, ask a question, do feel free to use the chat box there. The format for this is that we're going to hear from our panelists briefly to start with, and then we will have some time for discussion and questions, and we'll wrap it all up by 5 o'clock, because I do really appreciate everyone being busy and your valuable time and attention. So a quick round of introductions. I'm really pleased to have with us today, firstly, Graham Moor, who is the CEO of the Roofing Association. Just give us a quick wave, Graham. A lot of you will know of Graham. We're going to hear from him first very shortly. Following Graham, we've got Michael Sentch, who is a director of Project Unite. Michael's based in Hamilton. And then we've got David Strudwick, who is the director of About Roofing, and he's the Roofing Association representative based in Wanaka. I'm kind of jealous of David being in Wanaka. And then finally, Neil Gillespie, who's the director of Topline Roofing, and he's also a representative of Roofing Association for Auckland. So a great panel. Now I'm going to hand over to Graham to tell us a little bit about what he does and the role of RANZ and his insights into what he sees going on out in the industry. So you all up and running there, Graham?
Yeah, I am. Thanks, Matt. Thanks, Clima. They're one of our sponsors, so we're always keen to back our sponsors when they take initiatives like this. So it's a very good opportunity to sort of have those bolder conversations we need with each other out in the marketplace. So the Roofing Association was formed about 26 years ago now, and we've got over 300 members who cover the country, as you can see from the people there. I will say I live in the Bay of Islands, and that's probably up there as far as Wanaka is concerned, so I'll take Dave on in that space. Really what we're focused on, and myself, I suppose, a little bit about me, I've been in the industry 38 years, so I'm a plumber and a roofer by trade. I've been an industry trainer, and I've also been on the LBP board. I was on the first board there as well. So I'm probably reasonably well rounded in my knowledge, I suppose, of what goes on in the industry. But as far as our members are concerned, really it's about their professionalism and educating them and giving them the skills and or the resources, but also the places where they can go and find out about what they need to do. So, if it's finding out about great underlays, for example, from Clima, or coated products from New Zealand Steel or Pacific Core Coaters, and all those sort of companies that supply. And there's a whole lot of other companies that are members. So please visit our website at ranz.co.nz and have a look and see who we are and the people that are involved. When I was thinking about what we're going to be talking about today, it sort of made me reflect a little bit on what I've seen in my experiences and where we actually need to be heading. And I think we are starting to head in some better directions around our approaches to industry. I think for a long time there's been a lot of finger pointing, if you like, or we've hopped into our own little silos about how we want to operate and how we want to behave, and we think we know better and others are telling us this and what do they know and all this sort of thing. And what I've seen with our better performing members, if you like, who seem to get the really grunty jobs out there, and those ones that, I suppose if you want to call it roofing porn, it probably is for some of us, but when you see it, they're great jobs. And what they've done is they've got alongside, the designers and the architects, and they've thought it all through, and they've become a lot more collegial. So it's actually about the outcome for the customer ultimately. So you got to, it's the focus we should have always had. But I think what happens is we tend to look in the mirror and try and look after number one a bit too often at times, rather than taking a much wider approach as to where we want to go as an industry. And like I say, that's where we need to be heading. There's some good stuff going on at government level around that. I mean, the construction sector accord, when you start looking at some of the behaviours that are starting to come out of that group, and they will flow right across the industry as we look to behave better right across the whole chain. And I'm not saying up and down the chain, it's across, because we all have our contributions to make. And it's really important that we understand what each other's contributing and how we help each other to get the best outcomes. So, I've certainly seen, and I deal with architects on a weekly basis, where they ring the association asking for tips, clues, where do I go? Hey, can you check this detail for me? All that sort of stuff. Now, while that's not our primary function, of course, we're trying to make sure that they can see that the association members have that knowledge. And of course, we're going to be pushing back out and saying, hey, make sure you use a member of the association, because there's a better chance that they've got that level of understanding and appreciation of what you're trying to do in a project. So that's primarily where we go. I mean, one of the problems that I'm seeing, and we are addressing it, I've reached out to Boynes, for example, recently. We've got some variable outcomes coming out of the councils, and that's it just holds things up. There's different interpretations, there's different applications of E2AS1, for example, and it's a little bit concerning that people seem to be interpreting those documents differently to each other, when really, if you're asking a question about E2 in Invercargill, really I should be getting the same answer when I go to my council office in Kerikeri, for example. So there's some stuff there that we're working on, because we want better outcomes in that space too, because they're all, once again, they're all part of that, across that chain that I'm talking about, and we all need to be linked together to get the best outcomes. I look forward to hearing what the other gentlemen here have got to say. I can certainly vouch for their abilities. I mean, you've got some of our best members are offering up their views about what they see, what does and doesn't work for them. And they've been in there for a long time. Michael, for example, he's second generation in that business. And that business has gone on from strength to strength. And Dave, for example, he's been recognised as one of our best roofers in New Zealand, and won awards. And likewise, Michael's business, one of his staff, has also won the same award as David. So, really top end members of our association. So that's all I really got to say, and I look forward to your Q&As later and the input from the designer and everyone else that's joined, and thanks for taking the time.
Thank you, Graham. That's great. Good introduction. Just before I hand over to Michael, we were talking earlier about sometimes you field calls directly from architects looking for specific advice. Is that something that you want architects to do? And if so, where's the best place for them to go if they have any specific inquiries relating to roofs?
Obviously, it comes down to the type of roofing that's involved. So certainly in the metal space, there's a New Zealand metal roofing manufacturers. They have a code of practice, and that's available online, version 3. The Roofing Association itself, we've developed 3 how-to guides. Our next one will be out shortly. And I know there's plenty of the design fraternity would prefer those to be in some sort of digital format. So we're just in the process of doing that. Please acknowledge that we actually send all of these guides to all of the trainees in the country. So that's that education space that I think we try to own really, really well. And we can sell those. So once again, they're available on the website. Likewise, we have connections. There is a membrane association there, and we certainly have connections with many of our members that supply into that space. So if we can't find it, we will find somebody that will give you the right advice. So if
Awesome.
You're really, really stuck, but to be fair, most of the architects are right across this. It's some of that real curly stuff that they start reaching out for. So, and I think if obviously, reaching out to the likes of ProClima, they can get plenty of information as well.
Great. All right. Well, we'll come back and maybe hopefully pick up some of those issues later on. So let's now hand over to Mike. I'm just going to bring you up onto our virtual stage. Now, as Graham mentioned, as we said before, Michael's based in Hamilton, Director of Project Unite. And I think you've got a few other things on the go as well, like a lot of you guys seem to be very, very busy. So Michael, give us a bit of a rundown into your background, your experience in the industry. What are you seeing out there that's working well, and what would you like to see change or to make life easier for you guys?
Sure, thanks Matthew. So just as a bit of background on myself, I started roofing on site in my school holidays and then moved into that through my university holidays while I did a business management degree. I then moved into what was then project roofing, and there was a large group of project companies involved in the construction industry, a seismic installation company, a maintenance company, and it was quite a large group. So we put them all together, and obviously when that happened, the name altered to Project Unite. But in its current iteration, and overall, the company's been in operation for 39, almost 40 years now, and I've been working in it for almost 25. And we specifically started out as metal roofing and cladding installers, which has changed and morphed its way through now to we work over the entire North Island, completing work in Wellington quite recently, all the way up to Kaitaia, encapsulating all manner of facade systems, membranes, metal roofing, cladding, proprietary seismic systems, and other exclusive and bespoke systems that we import from around the world. For me, I've been on the RANZ executive for around 5 or 7 years now, and I've been their representative on the Specialist Trade Contractors Federation executive for the same time, and that led me to being fortunate enough to be part of this construction sector Accord formation group, and now sit on the Accord steering group, which has been a really good experience, very enlightening, and some real positive change coming out of that we are starting to see, which is really neat. As for what's working and what's not working, it's a pretty difficult year to start trying to comment on that. COVID-19's really knocked everything around, particularly programming, and then workflow and the way that resource can be used and is actually used. So yeah, definitely some really, really challenging things going on from an actual site perspective. In terms of the design side of things, over the last 5 years, we've spent a lot of time and effort becoming more and more involved in the ECI side of what we do, enveloping buildings. And Graham alluded to, the better outcomes that we're starting to see. And certainly when we get involved in that process, and, we can spend up to 2 years, probably almost even 3 on some really large scale, for instance, the Auckland airport project that's just been shelved. I spent probably around 3 years on that, along with some of our international suppliers and their technical teams and design teams, helping iron out, all manner of geometry, detail, specification, and just making sure everything lined up. The warranty expectations were all understood and acceptable to the end user. And what we have found through that process and on the 10 or 12 large-scale projects that we've achieved it on is that we are delivering a lot closer to projected program. We are delivering on or under budget every time. And the variation claim side of things is very minimal. So the admin works out a lot better as well. So we're really seeing some advantage when that collaboration comes in nice and early and everybody works together, rather than in those open tender type scenarios where we end up almost in a wee bit of that old school adversarial position, and all wanting to point fingers and close out final accounts in a pretty poor manner, which can get quite messy, to be frank. We've seen a lot of change in technology, a lot more warm roof, built up system, panel systems, different cores to panels. We're seeing a lot of these things change around the world. New Zealand's obviously extremely unique because of our UV. And so, we have seen some issues with some imported materials and finished product. We've also seen some real benefits to, if the right products are selected and the right detailing's used, we've seen some real benefit and some durability case studies that really extend way out past any expectation here. So, some really positive stuff going on, and some really tough stuff with this whole COVID-19, but yeah, we'll keep charging on. Thank you.
Awesome. And again, just a couple of things before we let you go there, Michael. You mentioned ECI. For those that aren't familiar with that, what's that?
Early contractor involvement. So right back at concept or preliminary stages, aiding in product selection and then moving through to specifications and detailing. It's early contractor involvement.
Yeah, cool. And that's something that I'd like to come back to and talk about more as to how we make that happen, because in talking with all of you guys leading up to today, that seems to be a very common theme, is that early input into a project goes a long way to making it run smoothly. But there are some challenges to that, because you guys don't have, your time isn't free. So obviously you need to be a bit careful about how involved you get in a project, but balancing that out with having a good level of input. Yeah,
it can also be occasionally, or we have come up against the brick wall a few times of it feels anti-competitive. Some clients are very hung up on 3 or 5 prices for every trade. And so we do see that sometimes, although we are starting to see those barriers be broken down pretty rapidly with the additional warranties and durability expectations and those things that can be added by that extra time being spent.
You also mentioned about international products and bringing products in from overseas. Is that, it might be less of a problem now. There seems to be a bit of a hold up in some of the ports, but is that something that you're seeing more of, where systems are coming in or new products coming in which you haven't seen before, or you're being asked to do things that aren't necessarily familiar in the New Zealand scene?
Yes, we are seeing a bit more of that. Particularly, Christchurch has had a big influence on seismic, the understanding of seismic, and then the way that we now cope with seismic is generally through engineered proprietary systems rather than number 8 wire New Zealand style. Yeah. But also, the architecture that we're starting to see and the design we're starting to see is really getting, pushing the edge, which is awesome. But obviously, it needs that next step of product, which is not quite developed here to a point yet.
Yeah, very good. All right, well, stay on the line there, Michael, because we're going to come back and talk more about some of those issues. But thank you for that overview. That's great. Now, down to Wanaka, we're going to bring on David, where I can find him. There he is. Let me just change my speakers here. How are things down in Wanaka, Dave?
Yep, good. Can you see me?
Not yet.
Right.
Coming on. There you go. Now gotcha.
There you go. Yep, all good. Nice sunny day down here with blue skies and paradise. Everyone
It's like
will be
that every
knocking
day,
off
isn't it?
now. Ah, yeah. Yep.
So same as the other guys. Give us a bit of a background to your experience, David. And we talked earlier. I know that you've got some ideas about some of the things that are going well that you're seeing more of, but also some things that you'd like to see or are a little bit cautious of that as a business owner and as a roofer and managing a team, be good to get into some of those issues as well. So, but start with a bit of a background as to you and your experience in the industry.
Yep, no problem. Thank you for Clima for putting this on and letting us get our probably our opinions across, and Graham from the Roofing Association for always supporting us. It's very privileged. Myself, I'm very severely dyslexic, so I don't have pretty much any education. I left school when I was around 17, and I went surfing for a year, and then I've been roofing ever since. I've been roofing for 27 years now, and we currently make all our own roofing products, and we employ 30 plus staff. We do anything from a garden shed to your super high-end award-winning architectural house that is bent and twisted, and yeah, is a really enjoyable process. I probably tend to call those sculptures more than houses. They're the projects that we sort of live for. We try and do probably 4 to 5 of those a year. So thanks to the architects that really push the boundaries on those. The guys really do inspire to do them, and when we do get them, they're very, very, very enjoyable. The guys can look back on them for many years. You know, they can drive past with family members or whoever it be and show them. They're always proud of them. And even up until this week, I took people that had come to Wanaka, I'd go and take them and show them these houses that have been designed from Wellington architects or for the likes around the country. So I'm always privileged to those. So please keep pushing those boundaries. Probably for that is probably one of my first conversations would be to know the difference between a snap block roof, which is probably this side, no, other one. This one up the top here, the clip-on roof. That's it's pretty much a set pan roof. Its limitations are very, very limited. It goes on a batten without the plywood. It's been brought in over the last 5 years to sort of take the pricing away out of the higher end markets to allow people to do it without plywood. There isn't much price difference between a snap-on roof and a proper tray roof, which are the bottom 2 profiles, which are these 2 here. The only difference is your plywood, but what you can do with the profiles is, it's just night and day. We're finding that architects are a lot more wanting they're wanting the price of a snap-on roof, but they want the experience and the detailing of a proper tray roof. I think I'd like to see down the line that we go back to the traditional roofing, like from overseas, and we go back to pushing the boundaries of what we can do with roofing. We can't do this with snap-on roofing. I've done a couple of projects where we've used the snap-on roofing, and the expectation was for it to come up like a true tray roof. So please, very early on in the process, figure the difference between the 2. And if you can work in with the tradesman, every town generally in New Zealand has a good tradesman. If you talk to a couple of people, you'll find them. They are around in those tradies. If you can get hold of them, stick with them, go with them, sit around a table with them, and I'm sure they'll be more than privileged to help you out. Yeah, so that's probably one of my topics. And my other point would be the topic of ventilating. We are on a ProClima page here, and it's actually got, they haven't asked me to do this, but I'd like architecture in New Zealand to figure out the difference between venting and what we in New Zealand we're just grabbing the cavity batten and we're just either putting it below the paper or on top of the paper, and we're not really sure what we're up to. It's a process that we're saying that the roof's going to condensate, but why is the roof going to condensate? Down here, down south, we have a bigger issue with it, but I tend to find that the Proclima system is a system. It's a German system, and it's been proven for a long time, and it works. And it works on the simple theory that under the pink bats in the ceiling space, they have an Intello system, I think it's called, and it's a membrane that doesn't really let the moisture through. So, and then their top layer sits hard down on the pink bats, and then their venting is above all that. What that stops is stops the moisture going through the pink bats through into the roof space, and vice versa. And that wet air is then what condensates. What we're finding down south here is that not many roofs actually condensate. The roofs that do condensate normally have a landscape issue involved, shading, so it doesn't get the sun over days, or the other issue that it can be is like I went to a house probably 4 or 5 months ago, and it was had condensation in a steel I-beam in the ceiling coming through a jib, and it was a simple design fault where they hadn't put a window in the laundry, and they had 3 kids and they were using the dryer all the time. So any condensation was going through the jib, through the pink bats and into the ceiling space, hitting the cold steel beam and coming down. This was causing a bit of an issue, and it could have been simply fixed with an opening window or a bit of mechanical venting. So down south here, anywhere that there's a skillion roof needs venting. Quite often you'll see a cavity batten put on, and then they'll go through with it. It's more the principle of should the house actually need venting first. The cavity in the ceiling space has been put there as a retro fix to fix the main issue, which is what's happening in the house and the environment in the house. And then what we've just started to see a lot at the moment is the wall cladding venting has not been terminated, and so we're getting the connection between the drainage venting on the walls and the roof venting. There wouldn't be too many high-end houses that we go to where we have to go back to the architect and correct the venting details. Because of the logistics involved and the legalities of it, it's always something that we have to throw back and get it redocumented, re-signed off, and then all of a sudden it opens up these real grey areas. So it leans ourselves, if we muck around with it, it leans ourselves to a real technical area where we could get ourselves in trouble. So yeah, that would probably be the biggest issue I see at the moment, is that there's a real confused area in the system. The New Zealand way we do it, we just number 8 wire, grab some cavity battens, and we sort of make up a system. I think Proclima is the only true system that is actually a design system. So yeah, pretty much that's all I've got. I don't know what the time is, Matt, or anything. So
no, you're good. Thank you, David. Really, inspirational story. I thank you for telling us about that past. I've got a son going through school. He's dyslexic, so I'm going to tell him maybe he should become a roofer. He can look after me when I'm older.
Yeah, I think every company in New Zealand should have a dyslexic person work for it.
Yeah.
I can sit there in the dark and I can turn one side of my mind off and work with the other. So yeah.
Coming on, I'm glad you brought up the ventilated roof. It is something that we're talking a lot about, and there is a lot of confusion there about what the purpose of, for example, the underlay is there. It's often there to mop up inevitable condensation. And I think you're absolutely right. The question should be not what are we going to do with the condensation, rather why is there condensation occurring? You're in a really interesting part of the world, because you're probably going to see the worst of it, because down in Wanaka, Queenstown, you get those more extreme temperatures, and that's the most challenging conditions, really, when you've got a bigger gradient between the temperature inside the building, and you get down to what, minus -5, -10, and cold winter nights, and that surface of the roof, you're getting really, really low temperatures, and that's where the worst case scenario is.
Yeah, correct. And we're also getting a lot of houses with bracing elements put in them. And they work for a beautiful surface for us to put our roofs on, and yet we can vent on top of those as well. But yeah, if they can stop what the issue is before it comes through the roof, that fixes a lot of the problems. Yeah, definitely.
And you mentioned Intello there, and often that will definitely help with that system because it prevents the warm, humid air from inside the building getting up into that roof space. And often, I briefly worked as a building surveyor. We often got called out to come and find where the roof was leaking, and often there was no leak in the roof. The moisture that the occupants could see coming down was condensation generated from within their living space, and that warm moist air had found its way up to the cold surface and was condensing because there was no airtight or air control layer in there, which is often needed particularly in your type of environment where you do get those extreme conditions.
You sort of go into a house and you can go through just even the simple as the heating system, from a gas log burner to a timber log burner, and whether they have kids or not, the husband's a chef or not, or all kinds of situations. But yeah, generally when you go to a house and you want to change something, there's always a conversation about condensation. Oh, the condensation. And I have to stand there until I go blue in the face. There shouldn't actually be condensation. And then people are really confused. They just think condensation is part and parcel with it. But Simon from Clima once probably told me about 4 or 5 years ago. He goes, Dave, if there's condensation, you've got a problem. And once it was explained to me, and it took a long time to grasp the concept of it. But once I got the concept of it, now I still get, we've got to control the condensation. We've got to make sure the condensation gets out. There shouldn't be condensation. If you've got condensation when you pull up a sheet of iron, your house has issues. So, yeah.
All right. Well, hopefully we'll come back to that. And I know we've got Richard Hollard from our Auckland office on the line as well. So if we have a chance, we'll come back to those details. But thank you, David. Stay with us on the call there. And I'm going to bring up now our final panelist, who is Neil Gillespie. And Neil is here in Auckland. And I know Neil's got some examples from projects that he's been working on here. Are you there, Neil? Can you hear us?
Yes, I can. Can you see me okay?
Not yet. Be coming through very shortly.
Okay.
There it is. Awesome. So yeah, Neil, as with the others, give us a bit of a rundown to who you are. Topline as well. Give us a bit of history there. Yeah, let us know about what you're seeing out in the real world, what's working well for you, and what you'd like to see to make things easier for you.
Okay, thank you, Matthew. Thank you, everyone, for jumping on the webinar this afternoon. Your time's precious, and it's really good to have you guys jumping on and listening to what we have to say. And we also hope that we can get some good collaboration happening between architects and subcontractors. We know it works well with architects and main contractors, but going to that next level and having really good conversations with the subcontractors is really beneficial for everyone. Yeah, so I'm 62 years old. I've been in the game a long time. I've been in the construction industry for 40 years. I'm a certified plumber. I'm a licensed metal roofing wall cladding installer, and I'm a licensed membrane installer. I also sit as Deputy Chairman of the Apprenticeship Training Trust here in Auckland, and we look after 360 trainees. So they're going through their apprenticeships. So you can see I'm very involved in upskilling and training young people. It's really important for our industry. With Topline, my wife and I started this business 33 years ago, based in Mount Eden here in Auckland. We've got 60 staff on the books at the moment, all employees, and they range across our plumbing, our gas fitting, and our roofing disciplines. We work in the greater Auckland area, and we're set up extremely well in roofing for anything from, like Dave does, you know, garden sheds right through to residential re-roofs. But our sweet spot really is our commercial work and our new commercial work. We're heavily involved in the tender market, so we see a lot of your architectural plans coming through to us with their specifications, and we get to see a lot of what you guys draw up for us. We've completed work on sites in Auckland such as the Devonport Library, Smales Farm, the Beehive, Unitec Campus, the Heritage Building there, and the CET Building. We worked on the remand block at Mount Eden Prison, Sylvia Park Shopping Mall, Ormiston Town Centre. We've done the Freedman's Bay Primary School, and we've done many MOE, Ministry of Education schools. So we're very familiar with the warm roof systems. We've put many of them on now. And it's really the way of the future for us. And we've also done a lot of TPO membranes. When I talk about the benefits of subcontractors collaborating with the architects, it's probably easier to give you just a couple of examples of how it looks when it's done really well, and it can be done really well. One example for us was when we were doing the Smales Farm Beehive project. It was a pretty big site, 6-story building, cladding up all the walls, warm roof on top, 3,500 square meters, and internal wall cladding and Euro-style flashings on the bottom and tray roofing. Due to the size of this project, the architect set up an office opposite the site, so he was only ever 5 to 10 minutes away from us. So I was also given a direct line to his phone and to his office, which was brilliant, because what it meant is whenever we came up against an issue on this site, I could ring the architect, tell him where I was, he would come up, see me, and we'd look at the issue there and then. He'd have a laptop with him, we'd draw it out, we'd talk about it together, come up with an option, come up with a solution, and he would then go back down to his office, draw up some really nice plans, send them out in a CI, and away we'd go. So the project could carry on without any delays, and that was really critical to the timelines for the main contractors. So the main contractors were really happy with us doing this. We almost bypassed them because we were only talking about technical issues, and at that point, unless they were involved as a builder or a mechanical engineer was in there, or the plumber or joinery guys, it was really normally just the architect and myself nutting these situations out. So that worked really well. I can actually share the screen with you guys and I can show you how it went. Oh, no, I won't do that. We'll just, oh, yep, here we go. I can show my screen here.
Yeah, we've got that now. That's good, Neil. We can see that.
Oh, you can see it, yeah. Yep. Okay, so this was just up in the plant room, and we had an issue around the lift shaft here. They had an internal gutter design initially. We couldn't do that because of structural steel running along the gutter line. So I called up the architect. We set up here. I had this set of plans on me, and I drew up, these are my doodles here, just showing an option that we could have run, and we ran with it. So we ultimately just made a large aluminium powder coated soaker flashing, back trayed it to the roof. It was only a short run, and the problem was solved. So it worked out really well. We got the CI that afternoon. I only had to price up to alter the flashing detail, and we're away. So there was no hold-ups. And at the same time, while we were there, you could see we altered the rain heads and down pipes. Initially, there was a down pipe running across the face of the building. I suggested we just take it straight down. The plumber connects it up at the ground level. And aesthetically, it was just a nicer finish. But these are the sort of things that we did that just all through the project just went off really well. So it was a really good operation that we ran. Yeah, so what this did, in another example, I'll just take that off for you. In another example, and this happened during the COVID shutdown, we had a Zoom meeting with an architect and a main contractor on site prior to starting. The Zoom meeting went for 2 hours plus, it was probably more than that. And it was really invaluable. The architect brought up all the design drawings, and we went through them one by one and identified all the issues that we could. And by doing this, we eliminated some flashings that weren't required. And if you can look at the screen now, you'll see what was there. If you look at the screen, you'll see this is just one design area. We deleted some flashings, and in the other boxes here, the architects made notes about it. So he's gone back from this meeting we had, and he's reconfigured everything on the plans. And when we started the work, everyone knew where we were going. There were no grey areas. It was black and white. Everyone knew what their role was, who was doing which flashing, and that was a really good situation. You know, it was only 2.5 to 3 hours of meeting time, and it saved a heck of a lot of details further down the track. So, you know, this is where the collaboration very early on is great between the architects and subcontractors. It pays off. We get better efficiencies on our sites, less downtime. The job gets done first time right. There's no rework. There's improved workflow, and the time management on the job is not held up. Obviously, less variations and day works, and so the costs are kept down. And really, you know, at the end of it, there's less stress for everybody involved. And we built up some pretty good relationships with these guys. And ultimately, at the end of the day, the client is a very happy client. But saying that, on the flip side, you know, we have had a lot of tenders come through into our office, and they come through with little or no detail, very little detail on some of the flashings. We open up our specifications and we look at our plans, and they don't align. We get incorrect product specifications. We know it's not going to work. It's incompatible with other products. Or another big one is there are deviations from specific systems, especially warm roof systems, where the suppliers or manufacturers have a specific plan and a layout, and the architect has decided to throw something else in there or change the system around, which isn't ideal. The other thing we're noticing a lot is the introduction of plywood under flashings, especially wider back trays. We see plywood coming up from the back tray up to the head flashings. This creates issues further down the track where the alignment of the head flashing has to have a step in it to match the build up on the back tray. And if in Smales Farm, for instance, we actually put ply under the back trays and the head flashings, but then they actually had to run them down the barge flashings as well to keep the line all correct. So, you know, you can start getting into some real detailed nitty-gritty stuff with some of these drawings, and some of the tenders will just decline to price them because we just know they're just going to be an absolute nightmare. So, you know, this is where another issue we have is we get a lot of soaker flashings down. And I know as architects, I see where you're coming from, that an aluminium powder coated soaker flashing is brilliant because it's bulletproof. It's not going to leak. And I guess in some ways, maybe you don't trust roofers in the past and installers in the past. You're worried about the weather tightness of certain areas, but it's getting to the point where it's going a little bit over the top, where we're now getting house roof plans with the aluminium soaker flashing under the barge ridge junction. And I mean, that's, you know, a good roofer should be able to waterproof that area without a soaker flashing. So, you know, it's just knowing when to use them and knowing when to back off, and have confidence in your roofer that they're doing the right thing. You know, as roofers and installers, we're committed to doing a really top-notch job, and that's why you should be using RANZ affiliated roofers. you know, there's a lot of backing there from RANZ for us, and there's a lot of training. The guys put a lot of effort in, and we are really proud of what we do. So, you know, we don't want to leave a job with any issues, basically. I've got some other flashings here. I just want to show you of some soakers that we had to fabricate. You can see them here. I'm not sure if everyone can see them, but with these aluminium welded flashings we've had to fabricate. They look like a jigsaw puzzle, and really, to be truthful, we shouldn't have to make these and install them. It was really transition areas of walls, parapets, and it was the only way that we could get what the architect wanted, and it was specified by the architect to go ahead and do this. The guy was really onto it, but it's something that could have been simplified in my mind. It could be a lot easier to do. The other thing about this is these flashings, they take a lot of effort. You got to tack them together. You got to dry fit them. Invariably, they don't always work first time. You got to re-weld them. You got to fit them again. You got to take them away, fully weld them, powder coat them. You can be waiting 2 to 3 weeks for these to come back to the site. And they can also be expensive, and ultimately they're going to slow the program down on the site. So we want to try and get away from this sort of detail. Other flashings that we come across in plans are really just plain impossible to install, and they don't even have to be really detailed flashings. They can be fairly simple, but they're just not going to work. So it's at these points prior to starting sites that we need to be talking to the architects and saying, hey, we can see a problem here. What are we going to do? We need to change it, you know. And we're really happy to come up with ideas. It's not up to us to design a building. That's the architect's role, but we're really happy to give some input into it. You know, we've been in the game a long time, a lot of us guys. We've seen what works, we've seen what doesn't work. And yeah, so just going back to that that last screenshot that I've got, this one here. You can see it's just a corner flashing on a wall cladding system. It has 2 interlocking soakers underneath, or what we call grab flashings. No problems there, but then the interlocking panel corner flashing is folded back onto the 2 grab flashings. And on a 6-meter run, this is from a 2-story building, from a toe flashing to underneath the feet. There is no way that we can get that flashing on. So, you know, this is where we go. We need direct contact with the architect, say, hey, come on, let's just redesign this and make it work. Okay. So really, you know, as I'm saying, this is where we need direct lines to the architects at the moment, and we don't want to override our main contractors. We know there's a formula to run, and we have to go through our contractors no matter what. But as far as discussing details, this really is about the architect and the installer. And the other thing is, if we can meet up, whether it be in on a site office, in a Zoom meeting or Teams meeting, we come to your office and talk about it, you come to ours, however it works, we need to do it, because every time we do this, it builds trust. So you guys get to start to trust the guys who are building this project for you, the subcontractors. Ultimately, it's the subcontractors building the builds. And we get to know what you want. We get to know what you're looking for without compromising the aesthetics of the building, and without compromising the weather tightness. But we all want to come out with the same result, and that is a brilliant outcome. You know, something that we can be proud to hand over at handover stage to our client. And that's pretty much it, guys. Yeah, thanks very much.
Awesome. Thank you, Neil, and thank you for sharing those pictures as well. That's it's a great visual to have those. Now I'm just going to bring back, we've got about 10 minutes left. I want to bring back all of our panelists onto the screen, so hopefully we can see and hear from them all. So we've got a few questions coming through. First of all, this one should be fairly easy. Possibly for you, Graham. How can how can designers participate in roofing games?
Oh, the roofing games. Oh, that's that was something that we supported at our conferences. How would designers participate? I don't know. Maybe they should get a trade and have got it made, and then they can be a competitor at the roofing games. Is that what you're asking? I'm not sure.
Probably. Yeah, I'd say get in touch with either Graham or the team at Roofing Association. If you haven't heard of the roofing games, check out roofinggames.co.nz and get involved with that. Martin, thanks, Martin. You got a few comments in there. Martin Biscuit. If people don't know Martin, definitely he runs a great operation down there in Nelson. Martin says maybe the listeners know that if they are installing roofing and cladding, they are taking over the responsibility for the envelope of this building. You guys got any comments on that? You know, in terms of overall responsibility of the whole envelope when you're touching the roof?
Yep. We take full responsibility to make the projects watertight. That's why sometimes when we have an opinion, it needs to be listened to, I guess. Sometimes you can not be listened to. So that's when it becomes an issue.
Sorry, Dave, I didn't turn. There you go. That was you didn't have your camera on there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's very critical that when we're doing jobs, that if we're not happy with something, that we stop. We don't, don't just go ahead and do something and walk away from it. You put your name on everything you put on.
Yeah, we also, I suppose the point also needs to be made that we actually carry a duty of care to the end user, which ultimately is enforceable by law for up to 10 years. So certainly, I'm sorry, I may have misheard the question, but I think Martin referred to the listeners that are installing. Is that?
Yeah, well, I think that is probably not as right. Most of the listeners are architects, so I don't imagine too many of those will be getting up on top of a roof and doing the job themselves. They'll be calling in the experts, which is you guys, I hope. But I think it's a good point just about the understanding of responsibilities and where that lies and the responsibility that you are taking on and doing that well. Yeah.
I don't know if I should share the example, but I have an example where I've told the architect that the roof needed plywood. It could potentially go wrong. The wind zoning was so extreme. It's all been emailed, it's all been documented, and now the project is left with a noisy roof because the architect just assumed better. Even stopped a meeting halfway through saying, why can't you listen to a tradesman of 30 years? And he just, and now what? They've got a brand new finished house with a noisy roof and they wonder why we didn't do the job properly. So at what point does an architect turn around and do wind loading and wind study testing? And they all do it for the view, they all do it for the sun, and they do it for everything, but there wouldn't be an architect in New Zealand that does it for wind loading. So sometimes it is important to listen to a tradesman when they do have an opinion.
Absolutely. And that's been a common thread, I think, from talking with you all prior to this hour, but also during these presentations about the importance of that collaboration. One of the key messages I really want architects to take from this is to really understand that vast amount of experience, and we're talking with you guys, 30 odd years experience out in the industry, and often working in a similar space and similar location. So that has got to come with a really good understanding of what is going to work and what's maybe not such a good idea, regardless of what's documented or required in that area. So I just really want to stress that point as well, that to listen to you guys. I want to just touch briefly on the nuts and bolts of that and how that collaboration works, because I I want to talk about tendering, because I know that tendering can be a problem, because it basically, it's a bit of a gamble. You don't know if you're going to be involved in the job or not. Is that a problem for you guys to be putting having your input into it at the design stage, but then not knowing whether you're going to be involved in the job or not?
Yeah, it's a major problem. We do a lot of tenders, and this is where I say we'll actually decline to tender if we're not happy with the plans and the specs. At the tender stage, you know, we in the market in Auckland at the moment, we can be tendering for between 8 to 12 main contractors. So if we're going to raise RFIs on every little detail that we see in the plans and send them through to those 8 to 12 contractors, they're then sending them through to the architects for clarification. We're not going to do that unless we know we've got the job. So what tends to happen is you'll either decline the tender or you'll tag out. And when you start tagging out, you start opening a whole lot of can of worms, because ultimately the roofer that tags the most issues out will probably win the job, but once they win it, then they got to turn around to the main contractor and say, well, actually, we haven't allowed for this and we haven't allowed for that, and it just snowballs and creates bad relationships. So, yeah, there's a real issue with us not receiving really well documented plans and specification. If we can't get those really well done at the front end, it's a nightmare.
Graham, have you got any general advice for how to navigate that process of getting your team on board early, you know, getting the contractors and subcontractors involved prior to knowing who's going to end up with the main contract?
I side with Neil quite a bit in his positioning around this. I mean, obviously, and I think David mentioned it when he spoke as well. You know, there's some architects, they get alongside them early, and these are solved. So they're not generally in that tender space as much. And Michael said it as well. Really, I suppose part of it is actually the architect having those conversations with their client, so they actually have a culture on that site where you can get a better outcome to make that work. Because I think if it's just the specialist trades and the architect, yeah, that's part of it, but it's not all of it. And as I said right at the front end, it's a total collaboration. So if the owner doesn't actually get into that process, well, then how can you expect the designer to come up with a concept that will drive that process? And then how does that work for all the various specialist trades and the main contractor on that site? So I think that we're starting to see some of that with the work that Michael's doing on the construction sector accord. Those are some of the things that are being addressed and will happen in time. We're certainly not going to solve it in a webinar, that's for sure. But you know, possibly, you know, when I hear that there's 8 people bidding that job, that's just dance to the bottom stuff. That's not actually about getting a really, really good outcome. You're just trying to squeeze as much margin and value out of that project so that you can deliver to possibly a preconceived too lower price.
Or figure out who's made the most mistakes.
Yeah, correct.
Yeah. Hey, look, we're going to run out of time, unfortunately. There are some questions coming up which are getting quite detailed regarding soca flashings and support underneath those, skillion roof details with regards to ventilation. I don't want to go there, unfortunately, because we are going to run out of time. It does suggest that we can follow those up, maybe having another technical session where we do dive into some of those details. Really what I wanted to focus on today was to highlight the experience that you all have out there, and to showcase the Roofing Association and your collective experience and also individual experience, and to really encourage architects to get in touch with you guys, make use of your experience out there. Neil, such great examples of just looking at plans. I did want to just ask you briefly that some of the solutions that you identified there, would you attribute that to your background as a plumber as well as a roofer, or is it just kind of from your experience looking at how claddings and drainage works in real life?
I think my 5 years plumbing experience or apprenticeship, and then you know, I'm still involved in plumbing. that has a big impact on how I see things, and Graham's will be the same. He's from a plumbing background.
Yeah.
And you do, with plumbers, they have a really great training program. So you're taught the theory side of installation, why things work, why things don't work, and it really makes you think about things before you start putting them together.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
And I think that's really good point. I just stress as well to architects. I just really encourage you to consider how much knowledge and experience these guys do have, and be open to suggestions. I think is the other thing. That don't be completely wedded to your final design. Be open to some suggestions and design input for potentially a better way or a different way of doing some of these details, because as you pointed out with your examples, you could save a lot of time and heartache when it comes to actually fitting all those complicated flashings together. Graham, last word for you. Where's the best place for people to find out more about what Roofing Association's up to, and what would be your final comments and requests for architects?
Okay, well, so you've obviously seen 3 of our best members here, but I can assure you I've got a lot of other members that are up there as far as their abilities are concerned as well. They're all, it's an often word, a word we use quite often, passionate about what they do, and I think you've seen it with the gentleman we've had on screen. You get these guys in a room, and certainly some of the women we've got in the room as well. They're powerful advocates for this industry. They enjoy what they do. They're focused on making sure they turn out good work. I mean, I've had some brilliant conversations with David down there in Wanaka about, he gets really frustrated when stuff doesn't go as it should, and that sort of thing, because all he's trying to do is get the best outcomes, and most of our members are like that, and the ones that aren't quite there, that's part of our role, is to get that education level up so we can get them all doing the best they can. These are the better performers in the industry. That's why they choose to belong to a trade association. It's not about just having a logo on the side of the vehicle. It's actually what that logo represents for them, and that means that they're proud of what they do. They continue to be proud. You can hear their staff are obviously proud of what they turn out as well. And I really enjoy what I see. It gives me a lot of pride when I see what our members talk about their trade like that, and it is a trade, a specialist trade at that. To get hold of the Roofing Association, we have our website there, so ranz.co.nz. You get hold of us if you need stuff. Like I say, we'll try and help as much as we can, but really the people out in the field are going to be your biggest help. So thanks for the chance, Clima. I appreciate you putting this on for the Roofing Association and obviously for yourselves.
Well, thank you. Thank you for the opportunity, and to all our panelists today, thanks for giving up your time away from your business and also your family. Really appreciate that, and apologies again, didn't get to all those questions, but Catherine, Martin and others who have asked some really great questions in there. I hope we can follow those up in more detail later on, and maybe do another event where we can dive into some of those details. Thank you very much. I'm Matthew Cutler Welsh, and it's been a real pleasure to bring you guys together today. And yeah, we should do it again sometime. So all the best, and look after yourselves out there.
Okay, take care.
Thanks, guys.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.